Hello, fantasy book lovers, TGIF. This is Thank Gods It's Fantasy podcast. We are Kayla, Veronica, and Brianna, three best friends who love talking about all things books. From the romance to the conflict, and of course, the morally gray men. Every 2 weeks, we'll be getting together to talk about theories, opinions, and reviews of our current read. Please read along, join in, and be one of our book besties too. Hi guys, and welcome to our show. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kayla, joined along with my co-hosts Veronica and Brianna. In this episode today, we will be recapping the first book of Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas.
So, we would like to announce a disclaimer that this book in particular is adult and does contain adult content, including both language and sexual content. So, turn back now if you don't want us to talk about those things with you. We would also like to note that while we are focusing entirely on this first book, there is a potential for spoilers for the second book. We try to keep it focused on this book, but there are some Easter eggs from the Sarah J. Maas universe at large being mentioned. So if you haven't read them all, don't worry. It won't hopefully mean anything to you.
Like me. Yeah.
Yes.
You shouldn't know entirely what's happening. But what we're going to do is basically recap what happened in this book. There's 4 parts to this book, and we're realizing that, you can tell, it's pretty big. So it's going to be one of our longer episodes. We have decided to most likely cut it in half, do 2 episodes that'll be released on the same day, just so that you guys can listen to it at your leisure. But what our idea of what we're going to do is we're going to recap what happens in each part, and then we will talk about it. We're going to start by doing that overview. So just bear with us. Like I said, this will be a little bit longer than what our typical episodes will be moving forward. These next 2 books are they're thick. We're doing the whole thing all at once. So to get us started, I'm going to start with part 1, which is The Hollow. For a little background setting, we are in Crescent City, which is a metropolis that was formerly known as Lunathian. Crescent City is ruled by 6 different lower heads. We have the Prime of the Wolves in Moonwood, the Fey Autumn King in 5 Roses, the Under King in the Bone Quarter, the Viper Queen in the Meat Market, the Oracle in the Old Square, and the River Queen, who lives beneath the Istros River in the Blue Court. Micah, the head of the Central Business District, or the CBD, as you might hear us call it, rules over them all. Micah is an archangel and only answers to the 6 living asteri above him. There are 4 houses in Midgard, which is the world that encompasses that Lunathian is in, that each type of veneer, which is a non-human, belongs to. The House of Earth and Blood, the House of Sky and Breath, the House of Flame and Shadow, and the House of Many Waters. You may see a theme there for the titles of each of these books. So, in part 1 of Crescent City, we are introduced to the main character, Bryce Quinlan, and her friends. Her best friend is Danica Fendir. She's a wolf shifter and is the alpha of the Pack of Devils. Danica is also second in line to be prime to the Valbaran wolves. The prime apparent is Sabine, Danica's mother, who is resentful of the fact that Danica received the family heirloom sword when the prime had been promising it to Sabine upon his death for centuries. In the opening of the book, Danica decides to leave this very sword at Bryce's workplace, like it means nothing, like it's a part of her gym bag, before going to a meeting with the city heads where she will see Bryce's half-brother, but full fae, Rune. Bryce isn't currently speaking with him, so she's not thrilled to hear that. We find out Danica and Bryce went out and drunkenly got tattoos together a few days prior to this, when Bryce complains about how much hers hurts. The city meeting is in regards to Philip Briggs. He is someone who Danica's pack had stopped from blowing up a club about a year before this. Philip Briggs was a part of the Human Rebellion. The Human Rebellion's goal is to overthrow all Veneer, the Asteri above them, who rule Midgard. Briggs is getting released from prison today on a technicality, and Danica is not very happy about it. We then get a look at Bryce's workplace. She works at Griffin Antiquities, which is owned by Jessica Roga, a 400-year-old, very powerful witch who defected and joined the House of Shadow and Flame. She now only answers to the Underking. Bryce's co-workers are Syrinx, a 30-pound chimera, and Lahaba, aka Lily, a small little fire sprite. Both are enslaved to Jessica to protect her rare collection of books. Bryce is currently being sent on her current task for Jessica is to find Luna's horn, which is an old Fae relic. We then get insight into the drop, which is when a Vanir drops into their power level and stops the aging process. Bryce and Danica plan to do it together when they turn 27 years old, because, not too old, where they're starting to get some wrinkles, but not too young, where they look too young. Fury, one of their other girlfriends from college, already made the drop, and she's some sort of assassin or mercenary. No one knows really which, and no one knows what type of Vanir Fury is or what house she's a part of. So she is a big question mark in general. The fourth person of their little foursome is Juniper. She is another friend from college, and she is a faun who is a professional ballerina and breaking all of those stereotypes there. Later on in this first part, we meet the rest of the pack of devils, one of which is Connor Holstrom, Danica's second. Connor has had a thing for Bryce since they met, but Danica hasn't ever given her go-ahead, so nothing's ever happened. And also, Bryce has never really given his pursuits any traction to go off of. Bryce stops by her and Danica's apartment where the pack of devils are having their weekly pack night. She finds out that nothing is going to be done to stop Briggs from being released today, and Danica's in quite a mood about it. Bryce has to leave because she has a date with her rich asshole boyfriend, Reed Redner, instead of staying in with the pack for pack night. Reed is late for their date, then ignores her on his phone. So Bryce dumps his ass and leaves to go hang out with her girlfriends, as she should.
Absolutely.
During that day, though, she did receive a text from Connor asking her to go out with him, and she finally agrees to it. Bryce gets offered a drug called Synth, which she declines because of its ridiculous price. She then heads into the White Raven, which is her favorite club, to meet up with Fury and Juniper. They proceed to do a F-ton of drugs, specifically Lightseeker and Mirthroot, and then dance the night away, which are two of Bryce's favorite things to do. Later on, Bryce stumbles home to find the whole pack of devils has been massacred in her apartment. There are only pieces left of them. Whatever killed them runs out of the apartment, and Bryce takes chase in her completely drug-addled state. She comes upon a gray creature with no eyes and translucent skin that's definitely not of this world, who's eating a malakim, which is another name for an angel. Bryce attacks it with a table leg, fighting the creature off, and it disappears into the night. Her thigh is cut wide open during the scuffle, but she proceeds to staunch the angel's wound and then calls for help from his phone. We are next introduced to three of Micah's Triari, which is his inner circle and his personal guard. Isaiah Tiberian, who is the commander of the 33rd, Hunt Athalar, aka the Umbra Mortis, who is Micah's personal assassin, and Victoria Vargos, who is a wraith. They're looking into an interrogation room where Bryce is seated and hasn't spoken for hours, while Vic tries to get information from her about what happened and what led to the death of the pack of devils. In comes mother effing Sabine, raging about her stupid sword rather than her daughter, who was just brutally murdered.
Boo. She sucks.
She sucks. She sucks big time. A call comes in from someone who must be pretty important in the Fae world. demanding that Bryce be released immediately. They do so to avoid diplomatic fallout. After Bryce hobbles out on that hurt leg, we're introduced to Rune Dannon, heir to the Valbaran Fae. He demands to know where Bryce is, referring to her as his cousin, which is their cover story per their stupid dad. End scene.
Very well.
All right,
done.
guys,
Very well
that is part 1.
Mm-hmm.
So, first impressions of the world. Do you like that it is a more modern fantasy world? Brie.
I do enjoy that. I think it is kind of a nice change of pace because I have obviously read her other books and they were not so modern. So it was kind of nice to see her switch things up a little bit. So I enjoyed that. But I know some people have a harder time with it because it does feel almost too real then in some regards, even though it is still very much fantasy. But I really like it.
What about you, V?
I like it. I enjoy like historical fiction and like seeing or like not seeing because I see them in my brain, but like reading about that stuff like that too. I like the whole like New World stuff, but having a modern fantasy I think was a good change up for me too because I had just finished reading the whole Akatar series and that having been so different, it was a good refreshing palette change.
Yeah. I loved it. I personally loved the modern fantasy, and I think maybe it is just because I had just gotten done reading all of her other work too, which are definitely not on the modern side.
Yeah.
I thought that a lot of the ways that she incorporated magic and First Light and all of that into making just modern things was pretty ingenious. And so that was one of the things that like caught me about the world that I loved the first time reading it through. So I definitely like it. I know that is for some people what they don't like as much about it because a lot of people want a true fantasy that feels like a fantasy that isn't super modern. So I get that too. First impressions on the characters. V, what did you think of the characters?
Well, it's hard for me to give a first impression because the first time I read it was all those years ago.
Yeah.
So then it was just kind of like a refresher. I loved that Connor had a big crush on Bryce for years, right? He just was trying to respect Danica because she's the pack leader. And he was just waiting for Danica to say, go ahead, like, you guys, like, I give you my blessing kind of thing. I love Danica and Bryce's friendship. I thought that was fun. I love the spiciness that Bryce has and that Danica kind of like eggs it on, like feeds into it because let's face it, I'm also kind of spicy.
Yes, you are.
But Lahaba's super cute. I really did. I don't think I was annoyed with anybody or disliked anybody in this first part yet. Like, it was fun getting to know everybody and kind of like how their connections were. What about you, Brie?
I really enjoyed the characters. I think Sarah J. Maas just does a phenomenal job of getting you attached to characters in such a short amount of time, especially when her intention is to brutally murder like half of them. So like I was really impressed that I was so like heartbroken in such a short amount of time. Like she does give them such good like backstories and such good interactions. And so I was just really attached to all of them before she broke my heart once again. And I think a favorite for me was just the like 4 girls being best friends, even though like they're really so different in so many ways, like and they don't even necessarily know everything about all of them. They are just like, we get along so well, we love each other, and we love hanging out, and that's really all there is to it.
Yeah,
I like it too.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I'm right on with you guys too. I loved Bryce and Danica's friendship, their banter, like you could tell why they were best friends. I loved the fact that even though Bryce was half human, half fae, Danica didn't care, and she was one of the most important people in the city, and that she had basically made her a wolf by extension. And the Pack of Devils just seemed like such a fun family, and they're talking about the Sunball games, and they're supporting Connor, Ethan, Connor's brother, and all of that just led to like, yeah, that attachment to these characters that you don't really expect. And then you have like a Game of Thrones death of is how I felt of like, I'm invested in these characters now. I'm so excited to see where things go with Bryce and Connor. Like, what a sweet relationship it's been building to this. And then like, I just could not believe that happened and that they were all dead. And you know, with fantasy, so often they come back to life at some point. And so I was just like, okay, when's it gonna happen?
When's it really gonna happen? Dead?
Yeah, they're not really dead, right? Because they wouldn't. She wouldn't do that to us, right?
She would.
She would.
She would. She definitely would, and she did. So that was hard, and then also just the degree of how violent it was.
Yes.
I knew what I was getting into with the book then, because it was a very violent death. The fact that nothing was left of them, they were in pieces, and then Bryce's interaction then with that demon thing was also very violent. I mean, he was eating someone.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, good to know. This is what I'm preparing for in this book.
And it was so jarring also because having come from the rest of her universe, she hadn't gotten into this full-fledged adult yet. And so when we go in and we're like, oh, we're doing drugs. Oh, wow, we are swearing. Oh, we are very vulgar. Okay, like, totally, I was like, I'm here for it. But whoa, that is not what I was quite expecting. So I liked it. I like an adult book, but it made a lot of that also more jarring. Like, oh, wow, I'm getting into it.
Yeah,
I agree.
Just the degree of drugs they did too. I was like, damn.
Yes.
They partied hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, how did she go from going on a date, flirting with Connor a little bit before, and then breaking up with her boyfriend, going to the club, agreeing to go on a date with Connor, and then sleeping with a guy in the bathroom while on the drugs and stuff like that? Just from here, like from 0 to 100.
Such a small section. Yes.
Well, and she was unapologetic about it also.
Correct.
At that point. I am unapologetically this person, so is Danica. We like to party. We're gonna F around and it's fine. So as much as I love their relationship, I was a little unsure about her to begin with, because it was like, damn, you put yourself in this like situation that then you get back to the apartment and you can't do anything. Granted, she's half fae, half human.
Yeah.
The most powerful Vanir in like the city just got brutally murdered. So you're like, what is she really going to do? You know? So it kind of goes both ways. Anything else from this part that kind of stuck out to you? They definitely get you to dislike some characters and put your guard up about some characters right off the bat. So there's Sabine, who they don't portray in a very good light.
No.
She's jealous, yeah.
I mean, the fact that she comes in and the first thing that she says is about her damn sword rather than anything about her daughter.
Yeah, hard to redeem her after all of that. Not that we really need to, but I mean, you can't start out that strongly being disliked and come back really by the end. Like, there's just no coming back from that, quite frankly, for me.
Yeah. First impressions of Hunt.
I don't remember, because he was mentioned, right? He was the person that had come and responded to the attack. But I don't think I had I'm just like, oh, he's just a person. He was there. And, sorry. I didn't know.
He definitely has a lot of preconceived notions about Bryce, like her being a party girl. So like you're not really sure what his role and everything's gonna be yet. So like I again, I don't think I established like a real like, oh, I need to feel a particular way about him. I think probably like Veronica, we were along for the ride and we hadn't established a true, this is how I feel about him yet.
Yeah, especially just in part one. There really wasn't
it really
like
doesn't
his
like
backstory
come till part two that I started to have some thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. I think I just felt on edge about him because Isaiah is very uneasy around him, and he has been in the same triary with him for a very long time. It explains that they were together in their previous one too, and that he still just feels that heaviness as soon as he's around. And so I thought that was really interesting. And he, he doesn't come across, he's not a warm and fuzzy guy to begin with in this beginning. So I was definitely, I think, on edge, unsure of him and where it was going to go. But yeah. Alrighty. So I'm going to send it over to Veronica, and she is going to hit part 2, the trench, for us.
Yes, there is a lot that happens in this part 2. All right. So after the attack, we fast forward like 22 months, and Bryce is still working for Jessica. She meets Maximus Tertian, who is a 200-year-old vampire who is the son of the richest Pangerian vamp at the Right Raven, which is the same club that her and her girlfriends had met at all those years ago, just to complete a business deal that was kind of like under the table. We didn't want like paperwork for it. Anyway, so Rune happens to show up when Maximus is trying to put the moves on Bryce, and after finding out she was meeting with the creep vamp, because he just gives those ick vibes, just handsy, and thinks that he's entitled and all that. And then remember that no one actually knows hers and Rune's true relationship. So the vamp is like kind of intimidated and tries to become possessive. And she's like, stop. You guys are all gross. And of course, she gets irritated with like Rune's alpha hole behavior. We all know that Bryce loves that term, alpha
Your
holes.
favorite.
Oh, I don't know. Like, I think she was just overused, and I just can't anymore with it. She obviously holds a grudge or something.
I mean, yes.
But Rune follows her home to make sure she's safe and tells her that the Autumn King, aka their dad, wants her to stay out of trouble, especially before the summit, which is just over a month away, I believe. The summit is where the Valbera's ruling powers gather together every 10 years to debate whatever issues or policies the Asteri ordered them to deal with. But each republic holds its own summit meeting on a rotating schedule yearly. So I think because of how many there are, it just comes out to be 10 years.
Yeah.
So Tertian, the vamp, is actually murdered that night. Hunt and Isaiah are sent to Griffin Antiquities to interrogate Bryce. Supposedly, she was the last person who might have seen Tertian alive. Naturally, Bryce is being difficult as her personality. I think that they expected that from her, since they only see her as a spoiled party girl. Micah, again, the governor of Crescent City, is going to meet up with them to talk to Jessica. But because she's out doing acquisition things, Bryce needs to call her. But before she calls her, Hunt drops the bomb and tells her that the attack is identical to Danica's and her pack. But what's this? Philip Briggs is in prison. He's been there for 2 years. That couldn't be, right? Like,
yeah, because he was framed for the murder. The
murder. Anyways, so Micah finally arrives not too long after this, and Bryce gets Jessica up on the vid screen. Like, I don't know, maybe like FaceTime or Zoom or something.
Whatever they have.
Whatever they have over there. And that's when he reveals that he wants Bryce to find the real murderer. Jessica and Micah kind of go back and forth about why he needs or wants Bryce to help them. And he says it's because she's the only one to have seen the demon that was summoned. Micah claims that that Angel doesn't have any memories from the attack, so that's a dead end. Jessica finally concedes only after Micah agrees to compensate her for Bryce's time while still also working at Griffin Antiquities, because let's face it, Bryce doesn't get a free day to just play around and play detective. So after this, Mike appoints Hunt to be on protection duty to kind of make sure that Bryce is okay, aka also just keep an eye on things. So Micah makes a deal with Hunt. Let's rewind. Short version. Hunt, he's an angel with phenomenal cosmic powers. He harnesses lightning. He was the commander of an elite rebellion legion led by his one true love, Shahar, an archangel with a sister named Sandriel. Sandriel sucks, by the way, if you didn't know. The rebellion believed the Republic was the enemy, and the rigid hierarchies were bullshit. They failed, and everyone who was on Shahar's side were tattooed with a black halo across their brow and an SPQM stamp with some magical witch ink that was nearly impossible to remove. I believe in the book, Hunt had amputated his arm and it just regrew back with the stamp on it. Like, that's how magical this shit is. But SPQM stands for, bear with me, laugh with me, at me, that's fine. Senatus Populusque Midgardor, or thank you.
Perfect. Well done.
Or the Midgard Senate and the people, which is so much easier to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
What?
But you know, things, I don't know if it's Latin.
SPQM, I'm going to stay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically that marks them as slaves to the Republic. So Hunt has been a slave for around 200 years and has had like 3 or 4 handlers. He doesn't like to say owners because that sucks. Sandriel, Shahar's sister, had been the one right before Micah. She had given Hunt to Micah to pay off some debt that she had in her part that she rules. Okay, present time. Micah wants Hunt to find the murderer because he doesn't want the Steri to see him as incompetent, especially right before the summit. So he offers him a deal he can't refuse. Because Hunt was a commander of the rebellion all those years ago, Micah was holding him responsible for all the deaths, not just the ones that he did, but all the deaths that had happened back when the rebellion was going on. All 2,217 of them. Micah would consider removing the halo once he atoned for all the carnage. A life for a life, supposedly. In the 4 years that Hunt has been with Micah, his count was a measly 82.
Wah, wah.
That's so
But
sad.
I know. I mean, you've been with someone for 4 years and supposedly you're the assassin, but you're just...
Yeah, he's his personal assassin.
I mean, 82 is still a lot in
It
4
is.
years, but you're
It
going to
is
be
a
doing
lot.
it for forever.
Forever. I mean...
Point
Yeah,
in
but
case.
it still kind of like gave him hope. But if Hunt found the killer before the summit, he would reduce his debt to 10. I mean, how could he refuse, right?
I mean, you can't. That's insane.
You can't.
I mean, he could still like drag it out. Like he'd be like, well, I'm going to just make
Take
you
my
kill
time.
these people. Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, 10 is way better than
I mean,
2,100.
shoot. He could do that in his sleep, quite literally.
Yes.
I know. With all his power.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Zap, zap.
oops, remember when Jessica wanted Bryce to find the horn in the first part? Well, guess what? Nobody found it. But for some reason, the Autumn King wants it now, and he wants his son, Rune, to find it. But what I remember is he says it's because the horn is a fey relic, which I think we did mention, or an artifact or something like that, created by the first starborn prince. His theory is that like calls to like, so Rune would have a better chance of finding it. Rune asks for Bryce's help. He wants to use Jessica's library. She only agrees if she gets access to Declan and all his spyware and technological savvy. Declan is one of Rune's like best friends, and I think they all live together.
They do.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if they live together or he just...
Oh, yeah.
Very
They have like
frat
a frat
house
house.
style, Beer pong.
He's also a lord of the Fae. Like his 2 best friends are also lords also.
So there it is. But while we're on the topic of Autumn King, let's talk about dear old dad. He's Bryce and Rune's father with 2 different females. Rune's mother was a noble who was used only to conceive an heir, and she was happy to do so. She wanted that privilege. She got it. She was grateful, thankful, blessed.
Hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed. There were lots of females who the king had been with, but Room's mom was never jealous because, again, she got that honor of having a baby, having his baby. But Bryce's mom, Ember, is 100% human.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly they had loved each other, but I guess after the honeymoon phase of the relationship, he was kind of an ass to Ember. So when she found out she was pregnant, she fled and hid from him. The king has immense power, but not as powerful as he would like. He isn't starborn, but Rune is. Rune pulled the star sword, and he was chosen to wield the starborn abilities. Even though Rune's powers, like his shadow and things from his mom's side, were very impressive, his starborn gifts were kind of lacking.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly, the last starborn prince was able to blind an enemy with a flash of his starlight, while Rune just had like a tiny spark in comparison. Womp womp. Anyhow, so Hunt is frustrated at Bryce because he thinks that she's not taking this whole find the murderer thing seriously, going on jogs, clubs, getting her nails did. But in reality, Bryce is freaking clever AF and she's doing work. She finds all the dots and connecting people, and she uses her brain to get info, from meeting with Maximus's girlfriend to very cleverly getting an audience with the Viper Queen, which is really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, I don't know if we truly appreciate how Bryce's mind works. She went to the Viper Queen's territory looking for obsidian salt, which is used to summon high-level demons, knowing that this would lure the queen out. And it worked. She killed 2 birds with one $10,000 stone.
Casual.
Just drop an easy 10K. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
This is when I realized how rich Jessica was.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when Bryce mentioned that she had skincare things that cost just as much and wouldn't even notice the money gone. Like, I can't even imagine having that much money. Or
just a badass.
Yes.
Honestly. Okay, so Hunt gets a call that there was a 3rd demon attack, but this time at Luna's temple. Coincidentally, this happens soon after Rune, Bryce, and Hunt met there, looking for evidence or things that they might have missed 2 years ago when the horn had originally gone missing. Rune tells them about the research into the horn that he had found in Jessica's archives and their connection to the Crystallos demon. And I think that's the first mention of the Crystallos demon there too. And the connection is the original Lightborn prince. So the prince made the horn, and I think the Crystallos demon finds it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was bred to find the horn specifically.
Yes. Okay. I think this is when when Hunt takes Bryce to the murder scene to see her reaction. Because at this point, he hasn't ruled out her as a suspect, but Bryce completely loses it. Like PTSD, she breaks down, she just doesn't know what to do with herself. How does someone ever get over seeing their best friend ripped to shreds? And then to see a replica of it, like, damn, that's kind of fucked up.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hunt realizes then that he did fuck up because he's an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So Bryce is pissed when she finds out that he thought that she would kill Danica or the Pack of Devil, and storms off. She gets a call from Juniper to meet with her at the White Raven. It's been a while since they hung out, and June had to be there anyway to meet up with some of her dancer friends. Hunt gets into the club, and that is when he finds out that she's been sober for like 2 years, which he's completely caught off guard because he just assumes that she was this party girl. Later, she tells him it's because it's easier for people to think that about her. So she just keeps giving off that persona. Mm-hmm. Rune shows up at the club, and then boom, the place explodes. Like, all of a sudden, holy shit. Juniper is livid. Bryce threw herself over Juniper to protect her from the blast. Nice, right? Of course. But Juniper already made the drop. She would most likely survive something like that. But Bryce, she could have seriously been injured. Blood and debris everywhere. Shell-shocked, Bryce is carried home by Hunt. He cleans her up and notices the huge scar on her upper thigh, the one he tried to close up the first time he met her after the first Cristallos attack. That's why she limps and winces occasionally, he realizes then. Being this close, Hunt starts to recognize signs of his attractions to her. He realizes he can't help himself around her. He can't look away a touch longer than it needs to be. Looking forward to seeing her daily, even with her temper and sass. It's been about 200 years since he's felt an attraction to anyone like this. I think he did talk about how he had been with other females. It's just,
Sex.
random. Yep. Like nothing. But Bryce is also starting to get the feels for him too, you guys. Both stubborn. They would never admit to it. And then it doesn't help that he confessed that he still thinks about his first love, Shahar, that he still pines for her. Okay, back to the explosion. They found out the bomb was triggered by a liquid explosive found in a crate. It had a C on it, a symbol for the rebels that Briggs, his followers, had used. But when they look at it closer, it could be really a picture of the horn. And perhaps it's a warning to those three to stay the F away. Right? Again, Bryce is suspect number one, but not to Hunt this time, to Micah. She was involved somehow with all three attacks and present at the White Raven when it blew to pieces. Rune again vouches for her. The Autumn King catches wind that Bryce is indeed not staying out of trouble, and now he wants someone to watch her 24/7. Rune, the loving and protective brother he is, volunteers to do it. Bryce, being the stubborn, you don't tell me what to do female she is, says, fuck that. I choose you, Hunt Athalar. Now he's living with her in the guest bedroom. How convenient. I honestly don't think you know someone unless you live with them once. You learn their habits, good and bad. It gets harder to keep secrets because you start to trust that person little by little. You become more comfortable with them and accept their shortcomings with the good and with the good things too. The sexual tension that's also starts to build there. And as you get to know someone, some things tend to surprise you, like how boring Hunt is and how his life revolves only around his work with the Triari. He only has crime scenes in his photos or in his phone.
Gross.
Not one selfie. So, of course, Bryce, being the person she is, just starts snapping pictures of everything for him. We also learn how easily trash TV can suck you in, like bangs and bangs, and they just start to bond over that kind of stuff on the couch. I know.
The three of them watching that together had me dead. Feels so relatable. Loved it so much.
I know.
Oh, I know you guys in your trash TV.
Yes.
Anyways, and then that also the Umber Mortis enjoyed watching Sunball games. Like he was a true fan, which was also kind of surprising since his whole life was just his work. But you start to see how strong a person really is, not like physically, but seeing them and what they have gone through and what they still go through and how they do it. Like how a good parental figure, Randall, Bryce's stepdad, and a poor one, the Autumn King, really impacts who you are.
Yeah.
We also find out how deeply Bryce loves her family and friends, and she will go through shit and back for the one she loves. She even buys earrings to keep him from being sold to like a terrible fae and having a horrible, horrible life. We find out that both Hunt and Bryce still think about the past often. Hunt and his time with Shahar, Bryce and the death of their best friend, but not just that. She has been thinking about the angel she saved that day. And that's when Hunt tells her that it was Micah. Surprise, surprise. No wonder why she couldn't find him in any of the hospitals. No wonder whenever she tried to call the Triari, they wouldn't tell her anything. This kind of thing, a half human, half fae, saving an archangel, the governor of Crescent City, would become a political nightmare. All she wanted to know was that if she made a difference that day, that she saved at least one person. Also in part 2, we kind of talk about how Vanir, is it Vanir or just Faye, who have to go through an ordeal? I think it's just Faye.
I think it's Faye.
Yeah.
But that's a good question.
I think it's just Faye because it varies from
Yes.
person to person.
Mm-hmm.
For some, it might be as simple as like overcoming an illness or a bit of personal strife. And for others, it might be like slaying a worm or a demon. But the greater the faith, the greater the ordeal. The ordeal is a precursor for making the drop. So you have to do this before you make the drop. Declan had done some research and he found that Sabine had messed with some of the footage from Luna's temple that night
Mm-hmm.
when the horn got stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And now Hunt suspects Sabine as one of the murderers or potential murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
You did it. That's the end of part 2, guys. So going right off of that, yeah, Sabine is definitely
Not looking
jealous. Yeah, she's jealous of her daughter, so
good.
that's a good person to have as a potential for the murderer.
Yeah.
What were your guys' impressions and reactions to part 2 in general? There's a lot that happens here.
For
Bree,
me,
do
it
you
was
wanna start?
heavy.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
sorry. It was
No, go
heavy
ahead,
with
Bea.
information. Like, it really was. You got to meet everyone. You got to, like, in the first part, you just kind of like touch on everybody. But then you kind of like dive deeper into like who they really are, what their thoughts are. So it was a loaded part, I thought,
Mm-hmm.
too. Just a lot of information for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of personal development that happens during this part for sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Brie?
I think part of what was hard for me in this section is through all of this, of course, Hunt has these preconceived notions of Bryce, but then to almost force her into going to that murder scene, I really felt like he was so dumb. Like the fact that you really thought she would have no reaction, regardless of what had happened with, like, that is a brutal murder. Not your average everyday person can walk up to a murder and be totally fine. Hunt, okay? Like, so yes, I get it was a test, but that's a horrible test. And honestly, at that point, it was disappointing that he hadn't begun to think a little more highly of like, we really haven't changed the tides at all yet. That's really what I think finally was that shift for him. But I was just like, but that's sad.
It is sad because even when he goes out and does his kills, he's affected by it. So why would he assume that she would be okay with it or not react that way? Because he's killed lots of people. 82 in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's not numb to that stuff. Like, he's still very affected by it.
Yeah.
And if he's the one who's doing the killing, why would he assume that someone who is also, I don't know. Yeah, he didn't think through that very well.
But I think that also this speaks to, because Hunt in this book is one of the people that has the most development.
Oh,
one of the characters that really changes a lot. I think it speaks to what he's gone through in the last 200 years. He is immune to other people's emotions. Those kills might affect him, but I don't think he's ever even taken a good look into that until he was with Bryce. I think he was immune to it. He became just a weapon. People saw him as a weapon, so he was a weapon. So I think that he was so out of touch with human, well, they're not human, but whatever, emotion.
Yeah.
And recognizing that. And just having some empathy in general. I think he had no empathy left because he had lost all of that through all the horrible things that he had been made to do over the years. So I think this is the start to really seeing the shift in Hunt.
Yeah.
And Bryce's effect on him.
Yes.
Because I don't think that he ever examined any of that until she came into his life.
Yeah.
So going off of that, I had spoke earlier about how it's not that I judged Bryce, but a little bit in that first part. I was kind of like, all right, how's this going to go? How are you feeling about her after part 2?
Again, I hate the whole alpha hole thing. I hate that she
She's got daddy issues, okay? She got a lot of alpha holes in her life.
She got a lot. There's a lot, right? And then it didn't help that like Danica fed into it.
Yes.
That, you know, her dad is a douchebag, and she feels that her brother like abandoned her or betrayed her or whatever. So yes, she does have a lot of issues. But man, like I said, she can carry a grudge, and she doesn't just carry it to those people. She carries it all around. She's got this huge chip on her shoulder for any guys. I mean, that was one of the reasons why she didn't want to start dating Connor, because she didn't need another alpha hole in her life, you know? I'm like, but I did love seeing or reading about Bryce and Lahaba's relationship, and even how Hunt was getting comfortable with Lily. Just hanging out with her. I know.
Athy. She has a big fat crush on him.
She does. And then like Syrinx. What a cutie, right? And then him escaping all the time.
I know.
And she's got no clue.
Literally so
Hunt
oblivious.
knows. Hunt knows, though.
Oh, yeah, he knows.
And he thinks it's hilarious.
Yes. I also loved Jessica. And yes, she's a badass. And like everyone is afraid of her.
Yeah.
But even I kind of like how she's like, I'm going to turn you into a toad, or I'm going to turn you into a donkey.
Of course you like that.
I feel like you would do that to your children happily. Like if you could, you'd be like, do you want to be this animal today? Because I'll do it. I'll freaking do it.
But I also love how calm she is when she makes these threats. And we're like, oh. But also, like, yes, she's very intimidating. But Bryce, I don't feel like is that intimidated by her. They have like this relationship, and I kind of like it because she's like, well, I'd like to be this today instead of a bug or something like that.
Yes.
So that was kind of like a nice little surprise, I think, instead of everyone fearing her. She's like, well, at least there's just one person.
Yes.
Well, and regardless of the fact, yes, she usually is like requires some kind of monetary whatever of Bryce. But Jessica shows up for Bryce over and over and over again. And for someone that doesn't answer to anyone but the Underking, she answers all of Bryce's calls, regardless. She pretty much gives her everything she wants. And I almost wonder if she would even enforce, like, the debts that she, quote unquote, you know, makes Bryce pay. Because she shows up for her. So there is... There's definitely, like, some love there for Bryce that she's kind of putting up a front about. But... she cares about her a lot, I think.
Well, yeah, and she even gives her that, like, necklace to, like, help protect her under, of course, the guise of, hey, I need you not to die while you do all these things. Yes. But I do think at a certain point, it really is, like, no, I do care for you in some regard, and I won't tell you that ever, but...
no, especially when Bryce went to go meet, like, the Viper Queen. You know that Jessica had no idea she was meeting with her. And she totally played along with that whole deal with the obsidian salt. Like, like it was nothing. She didn't bat an eye. You didn't hear any hesitation in her voice. She's like, call off the dogs. And she's like, done.
When she's that friend, like, if you really did, like, murder someone, you'd be like, hey, I need you to come bury this body with me, and she'd be like, already did it. Like, she would be that diehard, and I do appreciate that element from her for sure. That's fun.
So another relationship that is changing and kind of front and center, obviously, is Rune and Bryce. I almost feel bad for Rune because he's trying so hard. So hard to get back in his sister's good graces. You can tell how much he loves her. And man, is she not making it easy on him.
No. Sure is not.
Brie, what do you think about their relationship?
I of course, I have a lot of feelings because I have 3 brothers myself. Mind you, I am the oldest, so I feel like I do kind of sympathize with Rune in that way.
Yeah.
And I know she's holding a grudge for this very specific moment in time.
Yes.
But holy hell, like once you realize what that actually is, you're like, okay, I get it. I get where you were mad at him, but girl, it's been a long time and he's trying so hard and he loves the freaking shit out of you. Like,
Yeah.
even though you don't want to give him the time of day. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, thankfully they have to interact, you know, with the things going on. So it kind of forces them to break through that ice. And I do love seeing where their brother-sister relationship ends up going towards the end. But yeah, she was ruthless to him. And I do think she dragged it out a little long personally. But I also am very, like, yes, I can hold a grudge, but forgive and forget also to an extent, you know?
Yeah, she and they were best friends. Pre-Danica, Rune was her best friend.
He used to go visit her at her house instead of her always having to go over there.
Yeah. Yeah, so the fact that she takes it that far, I know she's really hurt, but man, I just feel so bad for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think part of that could stem from she probably harbors this fear that he's going to be like dad.
Yeah.
Because they are both full fae. He can be a little bit of an alpha Hulk. I get there's some fear in that also that's probably hindering that. But she really went hard on him.
We haven't really talked about Randall Salago.
I love him.
Badass.
Yeah. So he, as we said in this part, he is Bryce's stepdad.
Yeah.
Who marries Ember and who raises Bryce.
Yeah.
But he is also a notorious sharpshooter who is known around the world for how skilled he is.
Yeah.
He also raised Bryce to be just like him in that aspect. Love. And so she may look like the party girl, but there is a whole level underneath there of someone who has trained her entire life. You know? What are your impressions about her relationship with Randall?
Well, didn't he make her, like, he made a deal, like, in order for her to, like, move out or something like that, like, she had to prove that she could protect herself, so she had to wrestle him or take him down, right? And obviously she did it because she moved out. Yeah. But she's like, yeah, he kind of didn't expect it because I obviously paid more attention than he thought. But she loves him, like, fiercely.
So much.
And I love that she took everything that he showed her and she remembers it and she keeps up on those skills and stuff like that. It wasn't like, you wasted my time. Like, I feel like, you know, if it wasn't something that interested any young girl, they wouldn't really keep up with it or anything like that. But she values all the life lessons that he gave her. And
but you gotta also appreciate she played dumb early. Like, her party girl persona clearly started early because her dad even underestimated her. So she's been playing into this idea that, like, please, I'm weak. Underestimate me, see what happens. And I love that.
Do you think that's also because when her and her mom had run away, and when they got away, she had to pretend that she wasn't who she really was, and so that's probably where it kind of started from, right?
Oh yeah,
she's always been pretending. She's always had another level to her that people have been underestimating her since she was 13 and she went to go see her dad, and it obviously her true dad, not Randall, and it didn't go so well.
Yeah,
so she's been underestimated her entire life, not only for like that aspect of it, but also the fact that she's half human. She's a half breed is what people call them, and usually they are used and abused and they are not respected by the humans. They're not respected by Vanir. They have no place in this world in general. There's
Yeah.
so much hate against them. So she's always had that to go off of too.
Yeah.
So I feel like she's had this chip on her shoulder since she was little.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I feel like Ember is just like her.
Oh
They
my
are
gosh.
very much the exact same person.
Yes.
And I think that hard exterior that Bryce has is a lot because of her mom. Her mom
Yes.
has built her to be that way. She doesn't cut any punches with her. She's
Mhm.
very, very blunt.
Yeah.
So I think that's where she really gets it from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I love that Randall is like the mediator between
know.
her and her mother.
I know.
Like, even though he's this like world-renowned badass, he's like the one that's like, okay, mom's in a mood today.
Yeah, like, and he's just a big squishy teddy bear to them, and like,
Yeah.
really, he could destroy you.
Yeah. But you can just tell they're good people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who
Like,
love
really
her.
good people that just, really, really love
Yeah.
her. All right, guys, that is it for part 1. If you want to join us for part 2 of our Crescent City 1 recap, then head over to our page for the next episode. Also, if you like what you hear, then please share it with your friends. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. Thanks for being here.
Bye, everyone.